everyone, and welcome to Unit 10, Module 59, Social Cognitive Theories. Here are your learning objectives, and here is your vocab. So social cognitive theories seems kind of review from where in the learning unit, we're going to focus a little differently. So social cognitive perspective views behavior as being influenced by the interaction between people's traits and the social context. So this was proposed by Albert Bandura, remember our Bobo doll guy? And he focused on the interaction of our traits with the environment. That was the emphasis. The behavioral approach perspective focuses on the effects of learning on our personality development. So conditioning, observation, imitating, modeling, all those types of things. But the social cognitives do consider that as part of it, but they're emphasizing the mental part in the process. So less behavioralist because they're more so focused on the mental part. So our schemas, our memories, our expectations, and all of those things playing an important role in this triangle of factors. So an important component of the social cognitive perspective is reciprocal determinism. So you have interacting influences of your behavior, of your internal thoughts, and your environment. So for example, someone who is more outgoing, extroverted, maybe more of a risk taker, maybe they have been in an environment that has encouraged them and positively reinforced them to be a risk taker. That has helped them out in many ways. So they probably also seek out people around them who are similar or agreeable to that, who give them positive feedback about that. So as part of it is their personality, their extroversion, but part of it is their environment. And then it leads to certain behaviors, right? Like maybe they're all going to go rock climbing. And so then these behaviors, right, they lead to certain social interactions, certain environments, like the rock climbing environment, and then they're all interacting with each other. So each one shapes the other one. They're all they're reciprocal. So our environment shapes our behavior, but our behavior also shapes our environment. I hope that makes sense. Optimism and pessimism. These come up because it's our thought process that plays an important role in the social cognitive perspective. So they really emphasize an internal locus of control being important. And so how people explain why things happen to them is significant. And that's called our attributional style. So why did we do poorly on the test? Is it because we can't do it? There's nothing I can do to fix this. I'm just going to be terrible at it. That pessimistic style isn't going to be helpful. Having a more optimistic perspective, an attributional style, is found to be more beneficial. Those that expect good things receive good things. However, excessive optimism is actually not good either, because if someone becomes overconfident, then they also don't do the behaviors that they should be doing, right? And so that often leads to problems of its own. So a realistic amount of anxiety mixed with some optimism is ideal. And late adolescents tend to be more vulnerable to developing issues like developing STDs or HIV because they think that they are actually less vulnerable than their peers. That's like an overconfidence thing that we've discussed a little bit before. They think they're less likely than their peers to develop a drinking problem or anything like that in college. So that actually makes them more at risk because of that excessive optimism. So positive psychology kind of grew out of the humanistic perspective, but it comes into play here because we're talking about this optimism and this attributional style. And Martin Seligman, who was an APA president in 2002, wanted to turn attention away from focusing on once we are having difficulty, and he wanted to focus on basically preventative medicine, preventative psychology. focusing on promoting those highest qualities of life. And so he came up with positive psychology, the scientific study of the optimal human functioning. It aims to discover and promote strengths and virtues that enable individuals and communities to thrive. So things like neuroscience, education, health, and well-being are all researched with the idea of what can actually help people get and stay healthy or become healthier in their mind, not like obviously physically. So this is the idea of positive psychology. So can we be blind to our own incompetence? Well, yes, like we were just talking about, people who are overly optimistic can be overconfident. And the more we are overconfident, we actually tend to be the most incompetent. So as overconfidence rises, so does our incompetencies. They did a study where they took a grammar test, and the students that scored the lowest were the most oblivious. They actually thought they did well. So they were ignorant to how bad they did on the grammar test. It's not about denial, it's about a lack of awareness. So if you want to know how well you are doing with something, then you're better off asking a supervisor, a teacher, someone who has seen you do your work. This is why many businesses are turning to a more assessment center model, which is the idea where they are supervising you in the environment that you would work in. So teachers doing an internship, or college students doing an internship in a business, things like that, where they can watch the college student in the environment and give them feedback in that way. So let's look at evaluating these theories. So critics say they focus so much on the situation that they fail to really incorporate people's traits and fail to acknowledge that when you look at overall, there is a theme to how people react. On average, people tend to act a certain way when you look at all of their behaviors. Critics also say a person's emotions and unconscious motives and traits shine through in many situations. So the self, there's a few self words here. So the self is the organizer of our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And this is kind of the focus of all personality theories. The possible selves, that means the vision of yourself, like the vision of yourself as rich, the vision of yourself as loved or admired, the one you fear becoming. These are all different possible selves or visions of yourself. And studies find that these visions of self do give rise to what we actually achieve. So if we focus on these types of things, we can be more loved, or we can be more loving if we focus on these types of self. There is something called the spotlight effect, where we overestimate how much others actually notice things about us, often appearance or the way we act, or mistakes that we make. And adolescents are much more likely to feel the spotlight effect than any other age group. And they did a study at Cornell where they had to wear Barry Manilow t-shirts, and they were so embarrassed. They're like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to notice this. And they guessed that like half of the people would notice. Only 23% notice. So again, it's much fewer than we actually think are looking at us when we feel like everyone's looking at us. So self-esteem is our feeling of high or low self-worth. And people who have higher self-esteem are healthier, they achieve more, they are overall healthier, happier people. That is not a shock. Experiments show that low self-esteem, they're also more likely to disparage others, be angry at others, be more racially prejudiced. So kind of like throw back their feelings of low self-worth onto other people, or as Freud would say, project. Self-efficacy is one's sense of competence and effectiveness. So you can have a high sense of self-efficacy in math and a low sense of self-efficacy at golf. The self-serving bias is our readiness to perceive ourselves favorably. And this is a newer concept to psychology that we've realized through research, that people accept more responsibility when it's a good thing that happened and less when it's a failure. So we see ourselves as better than the average in every way. We think we're more ethical than our average counterparts. We think that we're better at our jobs than other people in our jobs. Like, we tend to put ourselves above everyone else, which if everyone's doing that, clearly we're not all right. They did a study of 540 college students, wrote an essay. Half were told that was great. Other half were told it was the worst essay. And what they found was the students that were told that it was great, those really high self-esteem people, were exceptionally more aggressive and competitive when they after played a video game. So too much inflation of our self-esteem can actually be harmful. And narcissism is an example of that. Excessive self-love and self-absorption is narcissism. And research shows we are becoming more and more narcissistic as a society. When we look at the culture itself, there's a lot of discussion about how these things fit into different cultures, because a lot of this, especially humanistic theories, are focused on the individual. And individualist cultures give priority to their own goals over the group, defining one's identity in terms of personal attributes rather than group. Whereas the collectivist countries tend to give priority to the goals of the group, and they define their identity according to the group. So, for example, when a U.S. gold medal swimmer won, she said, "I think I could just stay focused. It was my time to show the world what I could do." But when a Japanese gold medalist won the marathon, she said, "Here is the best coach in the world, the best manager, all of the people who support me. These are the things that came together for this medal." So when she wins, it's about how everyone did this. It wasn't her. But when we win, it's not about the individual people in this case. It's the society that we are in teaches us to be an individual and care about what are our personal goals and not really think about family and community, etc., when we're thinking about what's best for me. Whereas a collectivist culture doesn't think that way. It thinks more about like what's best for the group, and that's what I'm going to do. Takeaways. Social cognitive perspective was Bandura who originated this, and it focuses on that mental process and the idea of reciprocal determinism. This is a very important vocab that comes up often, and those two-way arrows were important. So your personality affects your environment, and your environment affects your personality, right? Or your environment affects the way that you think, right? So they're all interconnected. Remember all the self terms, so self-esteem, self-serving bias, self-efficacy, self-concept. Make sure you know all of those. Optimism is good, but too much is actually not helpful and could be harmful. In individualist cultures versus collectivist culture, make sure you know the difference. And that sums up Module 59, and I will see you in class.